What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Studs and Duds, an NFL player review series where I'll be talking about the rising and falling players around the NFL via the lens of my own custom community Madden roster. Guys, if you are playing Madden 25 and you want to get the roster, just search That Franchise Guy in the file share. And I want to remind you guys as well, in my spare time, I do still do some streams and rebuilds and stuff on my Twitch and on my gaming channel, TFG Plays. Those links are in the description below if you want to go check that stuff out. But as we get started here, if you guys could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button. A lot goes into this series. It's not a big breadwinner for me on this channel, but I know that it is for you NFL diehards of this channel. And you loyal subscribers and fans of the channel are the lifeblood of this channel, so I'm more than happy to deliver for you guys. But if you could return the favor and just hit that like button, get this video in front of as many eyes as possible, I would really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get started with the AFC North here today and the Cincinnati Bengals first up. And unfortunately for Cincinnati, not a ton of positives to talk about. They're definitely going through it this season. But for their super stud here today, basically the player from the first half of this season that I wanted to highlight the most, I am going with a player in the secondary that has quietly been very good for a defense that has really struggled this year, and that is DJ Turner. Turner was a highly drafted second-round pick last year out of Michigan with a ton of speed, but a really kind of, I would just say, poor rookie season. It's tough to play rookie corner in the NFL, but a guy that we certainly didn't know what they were going to get from him this year, and it's definitely been a positive for Turner. He's been targeted 25 times this year. It's about 5 times a game. He's been starting for the last 5 weeks on the outside for them, and he's given up just 13 receptions on those 25 targets. Anytime you're around a 50% completion percentage when targeted, that's pretty good territory. 142 yards, which is about average on 13 receptions, but 4 pass breakups, 0 touchdowns, not really giving up the big plays, which was definitely a selling point on Turner with that long speed. And again, the secondary has really struggled, but he's been a bright spot. But as we switch over to talk about the offensive side of things, we're going to start on a negative note with running back Zach Moss. Things started okay for him in the first month, but it has been a brutal second month of his Bengals tenure here. The last 4 weeks, just 2.1 yards per attempt. And he has just 1 missed tackle forced in the last month of football for the Bengals, and that came 4 weeks ago. So the last 3 games, he hasn't made a single tackle or miss. He's fumbled twice on the season. He just has not been the replacement for Joe Mixon that they were hoping to get, maybe 80% of Joe Mixon and Zach Moss. It's just not been the case. So I'm curious to see if he can turn this around or just how long he's going to be their kind of early down short yardage back here, especially because Chase Brown is running well. For one reason or another, he still hasn't fully gained the trust of this coaching staff, but I do question how long that's going to last. It's actually ironic that this kind of reminds me of the running back that was with Zach Moss once upon a time in James Cook, kind of that speedy, electric guy that's viewed as more of a scat back, but hey, you give him the ball, he shows he's actually got some vision and ability to contribute in a lot of different run concepts. I'm not saying Chase Brown is James Cook, but eventually the Bills came to the realization that, hey, yeah, he might be undersized, he might have a fumbling issue, but let's just give him the ball because he's super explosive. So I do wonder if that turning of the guard is going to happen here sooner rather than later for Cincinnati. It's kind of on Zach Taylor at this point to maybe make that switch. But Brown is running well. It's nothing crazy. It's in limited looks, but definitely passes the eye test more than Zach Moss. So a -3 for Zach Moss, 78 to a 75, and then a +2 for Chase Brown, closing the gap there on the more quote-unquote established Zach Moss, who did have a good year in Indianapolis last year. So I hope he can get some of that mojo back. But into the receiving crop, we've got Andre Iosivas, a +1. He's done some really nice stuff. Actually, the most impressive thing he's done for me is some of the routes he's able to run down in the red zone. Early in the year, he showed to be a real threat there, but it's really fallen off the last couple of weeks. And a bummer, especially like you look at last week, T. Higgins unavailable against the Eagles, and Iosivas nowhere to be found, 0 catches on 3 targets and a drop. So it's certainly not all been good for him. He's yet to really, I think, take that next step into being more of a reliable option for the Bengals. but he's shown some flashes and deserves to go up a little bit here. And then Mike Gesicki, who did step up in that Eagles game. He's been relatively quiet. He's been available and stable, but 7-reception game against the Eagles. And he has made some tough catches. He had a frustrating drop in the Chiefs game that still rings true in my mind. But 5 for 8 on contested catches this year. It's pretty solid. And then the rookie tight end, Eric All, who's been a nice tight end too for the Bengals. He's done a good job as a blocker. He's made some catches when given the opportunities, which haven't been a lot. But he's kind of passed the eye test for a young tight end. It's been good to see him get healthy so quickly because there were some questions on kind of when his availability was going to occur. Coming off the injury at Iowa by way of Michigan. But yeah, kind of a balanced, do-it-all Iowa tight end. We know how those guys tend to work out in the NFL. So it's been a pretty encouraging start, even though he's not really a starter or prominent in this offense. But when they did go into 12 personnel and have gone into 12 personnel, especially earlier in the year, they've shown that they can do some nice stuff out of that package. But then just one player moving on the offensive line, it's unfortunately going to be my guy, Amarius Mims. I still believe in the future for Amarius Mims, but coming out of Georgia, just so inexperienced, really just one full career's worth of snaps under his belt in college. And, had a lot of camp hype, but has been thrust into starting action sooner than they probably anticipated here. Trent Brown has missed a lot of time, and there's certainly been more bad than good on Amarius Mims. He's showing the same issue he had at Georgia, where some of his reaction time can hurt his foot speed, where he gets beat by, bendy edge rushers quite a lot this year, frankly. And he hasn't been the stable impact in the run game that you could have hoped as well. So just some of that game awareness, the reactionary, really ability to process what he's seeing and put that into action with his incredible, length and physical traits that he has. So not a good start for Mims. And just a teaser, he's not the only first-round Georgia offensive tackle going down in this video here today. But let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. This defensive line's been a big talking point for the Bengals. They're not playing particularly well, but Chris Jenkins, the rookie second rounder out of Michigan, they love their Michigan players here for the Bengals. And, he's stepped in and done his job as a run defender. He's rotating in that group. Just like we saw at Michigan, hasn't really figured out how to rush the passer yet. Just very abysmal pass rush production on his looks there. But their run defense has improved to a decent degree in the second half of this first half of the season here. Chris Jenkins has contributed to that. And then Sheldon Rankins is going to come down. He was a relatively large free agent signing that they made, and he's just been a disaster. He's been as bad against the run as you might have expected. I mean, he's never been a good run defender, but where they have had a lot of issues against the run, you can point fingers at Sheldon Rankins plenty of the times, just kind of abandoning that gap, not holding his own against the run. But that's not terribly surprising. That's not even really what they signed him to do. They signed him to contribute to this pass rush, and my Lord, he is not doing that. Just 4 pressures and a sack this year on 112 pass rush snaps. That is not cutting it. That's not what they're paying him to do, and he needs to come down for it. And then I also want to just hint at Trey Hendrickson. I love Trey Hendrickson. I've got him rated very highly as an 89 overall in the Madden roster. That is a little bit high based on what he's done this year, but I do know he's been battling through some stuff injury-wise, so I didn't quite have it in me to lower Trey Hendrickson, but it's not that he's having a bad season. He's still made an impact for this team. There's been some games where he's the only shot at a pass rush that they have, and teams can really focus on him if they want and leave everybody else one-on-one. But you are definitely seeing just a drop-off in his efficiency. Again, not a bad season, but 89, a little bit too high based on how he's played. So I didn't want to lower him quite yet. Something we'll have to check back on in our end-of-season studs and duds. But then back into the secondary, I mentioned DJ Turner's playing well. Well, another Michigan man for this defense, Daxton Hill. I thought about him also for the super stud. It's really devastating that he went down for this season. He was one of the exciting points of this Bengals defense heading into the year from the offseason, and really for the first month of the year. He was a first-round safety that sat for a year behind Jesse Bates. They put him in as a safety to replace Jesse Bates last year. It was a disaster, but he's just such a freak athlete, not just the speed, but really good size and hip fluidity. agility, all that stuff you look for in a cornerback. So they put him back to corner, where it's much closer to what he played at Michigan. He was a slot corner at Michigan, but he was playing outside for the Bengals. And man, he really looked the part. Really, his biggest deficiency was missed tackles, which is not what you expect for him based on his resume and being a converted safety. So hopefully when he gets back next year, that can get cleaned up. But this is just a bummer. I mean, he was just really sticky in coverage and was a huge bright spot. DJ Turner hadn't really been playing up to that point. So it's fun to think of what these two Michigan DBs could do to help things in the secondary where they've just been so loose. But it just hasn't been good since Dax Hill went down. And this team has really struggled to find those draft hits. And not that he can't be a part of the future or anything, but it would have been really fun to see just how far this could go for Dax Hill. I was making a ton of Byron Jones comps for Dax Hill, who was just kind of a meh safety as a freaky first-round pick for the Cowboys, and then mid-career made that switch to corner and became kind of a Pro Bowl caliber guy, and I saw a lot of that in Dax Hill. So, just a huge bummer that his season ended as early as it did, but hopefully can get back there next year and ball out. But definitely some players have to come down in the secondary. If they're struggling as much as they are in terms of pass defense, and we've already had two guys going up, where are those issues coming from? So really, Cam Taylor-Britt has been a big problem at cornerback. He's getting targeted so much, and he is kind of a frisky, instinctive playmaker type, so his production's not terrible, not great, but 4 passes defended with an interception in there. And he made a hell of a play, week 2 interception for the Chiefs. I can picture it. Went over a receiver for a catch. I don't know if it was Rashee Rice or who it was. I can't quite remember. But yeah, like there's still some highlight plays in there, but he's tied for 4th in the league for yards allowed. He's been penalized 4 times, giving up 68% of his receptions on 41 targets. As I mentioned, like DJ Turner, 50% reception. That's like a good mark for a corner. 60 is like below average. If you're allowing 70% of your targets, that's like liability territory. And that's where Cam Taylor-Britt is sitting right now. So he's going to go down -1, still a young player. Cornerback is very volatile. I'm not giving up on Cam Taylor-Britt, but he has been going through it this year. And then both these safeties, I mean, they've been maybe a little bit better than the safety play they got at the end of last season, but this was a huge talking point for the Bengals, was how bad the safety play was last year and kind of going out in free agency to address those issues. And they just didn't hit on this. Von Bell at 30 years old, I saw him in person at a Panthers game, and he just looks so slow out there, man. He does not have range on the back end, and it's not really a role I think he's particularly comfortable in, where they do ask him to play deep and, cover the whole field. I feel like his best play has come as more of a strong safety type. So he's just all around struggling. And Geno Stone, man, it's just case number 75 million. As if we needed yet another example of why interception stats are the most fluky, fraudulent stat that leads to overrated players year in, year out. You get 5-6 interceptions year after year after year, there's something to that. But how many times do we see guys like Geno Stone, who, look, I like Geno Stone. I love Iowa defensive backs. I think it's super cool that he was a 7th-round pick, climbed up the depth chart, had a monster year in his contract year, got paid, kind of duped the Cincinnati Bengals into making him a starter for them. And he played really well on a tremendous Ravens defense last year. But this is a guy that never really had any sort of pass defense productivity. He was a guy that did miss a ton of tackles as the 3rd safety in Baltimore last year, but the 7 interceptions, you got to pay him. He had 7 picks, right? Well, Baltimore's smart about it. They say, well, we don't really value that stat. We saw a lot of issues on your tape. They let him go. Cincinnati pays up for it. And he's just been so mediocre on the back end. He's slow to the ball, not a rangy player on the back end. And because of that, he finds himself in compromising situations in terms of tackles. He's been a little bit better than last year, but still missing 15% of his tackle attempts this year. And again, really no pass defense productivity at all. Just has not been around the ball. It just has not been a good signing for the Bengals. So he's coming down -2, 77 to a 75. Again, I like Geno Stone. I hope he turns this thing around, but just yet another example of why we go at it with the kind of casual football fans about interception stats. Those 7 picks were 0.07% of his 1,000 snaps played last year. You got to look at more than just the plays where he had opportunistic opportunities to catch the football back there. So there are your Bengals. Before we go to the Browns, I had to do this. I lowered Marvin Harrison in the NFC West episode last week because he really had a few weeks in a row where, he just wasn't quite living up to the hype. And then he turns around and lives up to the hype. So he gets his 2 ratings points back and 1 for absolutely balling out against the Dolphins. I broke down Marvin Harrison on the Fully Inflated Football podcast this week. So if you want to hear more about me praising Marv, you can go check that out. But the Cleveland Browns are up next. A lot of red for the Browns, though. Maybe things are trending up with Jameis taking over. But yeah, let's get into it. We are going to start with Deshaun Watson. It has been discussed ad nauseum just how bad Deshaun has been. But he's been so bad that instead of doing a super stud for the Browns, because I really didn't have a great option for that, there's a couple guys that we're going to be praising here, I felt it was better to highlight just how truly terrible Watson has been. And nobody feels bad for the guy, I don't think. Was getting booed when he got hurt. Like, that's the type of situation we're at here with Deshaun Watson. But yeah, he just, to me, looked unprepared, looked like a backup's backup coming in. The biggest thing that stood out to me was he just didn't throw the ball. He didn't understand the definition of the position. He would take the snap, look at open receivers, and just hold it until he got sacked. It was really, really tough to watch. He goes down 10 here. And that's also factoring in, like, okay, he's already looked physically less than he was at his prime in Houston. I don't think he's done a great job to take care of his body, stay in good shape, to be a great athlete like he once was. You just could see it when he tried to get out of sacks and scramble, just didn't have the juice that he did in Houston. So not only did you already see a diminished physical ability from him, but now he's going to have to bounce back from an Achilles tear. I mean, I'm at the point where I'm not sure Watson's ever going to play in the NFL again, because Cleveland might just tuck this guy into a box. They might release him. Who the hell is signing Deshaun Watson after all of this? It's just been crazy to see. And it's the only player ever that I can say you love to see it. I mean, see it, dude. But let's talk about the rest of the Browns. This one might not sit well with Browns fans. Nick Chubb's going to go down 4 here for this episode of Studs and Duds. This was more of like, I was curious to see what version of Nick Chubb we were going to get when he took the field. I left him at an 89 rating heading into the year, but that was like the massive like question mark of all question marks, right? And it's not so much a -4. It's more of like, okay, I've watched Nick Chubb a couple weeks now. This is where I think he's at. So I wanted to preface with that. But, he still, to me, looks like a good running back. The vision is still exceptional. Even some of the lateral agility looks pretty good for me. But to me, the acceleration and burst through the hole that he once had, it's not there currently. This is a guy that's had a lot of injuries. It's been a tough road back. I hope that when we do Studs and Duds again at the end of the year, he is able to get back to full speed, and we can talk about Nick Chubb as one of the best running backs in the NFL again. But I think anybody can understand realistically it's just not where he's at, even if it's not his fault at all. And then the other running backs are going to go down too. Deontay Foreman, I liked this signing for the Browns because I felt like the last time he actually played for the Carolina Panthers 2 years ago, he actually ran really hard. Chicago just didn't use him, and now he goes to Cleveland. I thought he would be pretty good, but just really inefficient, looked non-committal. So he had to come down too. And then Jerome Ford, kind of what I talked about in the deep dive, where his vision is just so frustrating. And it's not like my opinion on him has changed that much, but they just couldn't get the ground, like any semblance of a ground game going with Jerome Ford. And he's just an interesting player because you look at the final rushing yards when he gets a bunch of carries and you're like, he had like adequate production. And he does have a lot of juice and explosive ability, to be fair, but he really does have some of the worst vision I've ever seen for a running back, and it leads to a total boomer bust rushing style. And he certainly wasn't helping the issue with Deshaun Watson because he was a big contributor to them ending up in 2nd and 11 3rd and 9 so often. Even if you get those exciting runs once every couple of weeks, it does not compensate for the amount of bad vision runs that he had. So he's coming down 1. But some of these receivers are trending up. Cedric Tillman, super happy for him. He's always had the talent, in my opinion, but has just not really gotten the opportunity to settle in here in Cleveland. And to be fair, when he's played, he's actually had some inconsistent moments with some drops and, just not coming down with some of his targets. But man, ever since the last 2 weeks, he's woken, coming alive for the Browns, and it all adds up, right? They trade away Amari Cooper. That allows him to get the starting opportunity. That I always said that the Jerry Jeudy addition was strange to me because I felt like Jeudy was a little redundant with Amari Cooper as your kind of route runner type. Obviously, Cooper's got a little bit more to him than that. But I always felt like Cedric Tillman should have been the guy that got the opportunity to start this year, whether that meant you don't sign Jerry Jeudy or, like we've seen now, you move on from Amari Cooper. But that just all makes sense, putting him in as that big-bodied possession receiver. Really a lot of shades of Nico Collins, where he's more fluid than you would expect for a bigger wide receiver, and great ball skills, pretty good after the catch even. He's really been good with Jameis here. A monster game against the Ravens, catches the game-winning touchdown. I'm just really impressed by what we see from Cedric Tillman. And honestly, I'm kind of sad we're not doing this in 2 weeks for the Browns, because if he keeps up at this rate, I know Nico Collins is absolutely balling out, and I have given a lot of praise to Nico Collins. But we've seen the meteoric rise that Collins has had. I just see a lot of similarities there with Tillman, and I'll stop short of that to say that he's going to get there. But just really encouraged there. And then I do want to at least mention Elijah Moore, just talk about reawakening with Jameis Winston. A really impressive day against the Ravens. Now, if we did it a week ago, we would have had to lower Elijah Moore because he had just completely fallen out within this offense and wasn't playing well himself. So just the route running and even some of the catches he was making, like if he plays like that, he's going to be a really reliable separator and option for Jameis, and could be going up here. He's got the talent. It's just been a consistency problem for him. But then Jordan Akins, not much to say here, just +1 for tight end too. He's made some nice plays in 12 personnel and had to step up and was somewhat reliable based on where we've got him rated as a 70 when David Njoku went down. But some movement on the offensive line for sure. This unit has really struggled. So Jedrick Wills at left tackle, he's hurt again, but it's been a kind of steady decline for him. Just has not lived up to that first-round draft pedigree. He's a very average tackle. He's not a turnstile. He's not a liability. But just, again, he had a strong start to his career and just has been kind of steadily on the decline, and I think he's on the outs here in Cleveland. But then DeJuan Jones, -2 for Jones. Look, I like DeJuan Jones. I think was drafted later than he should have been, and actually played pretty well in his rookie season, at least in pass protection at right tackle. But they had to count on him with the injury to Conklin, waiting on him to come back. They had to count on him at starting right tackle to start the year, and he was a real problem. Now, some of Watson's pocket decisions and how long he held the ball, I certainly don't think helped. They ended up actually kicking Jones to left tackle, and he had a very up and down day against the Ravens in his first, I believe, his first career start at left tackle. So he needed to come down. You've definitely felt the oversizedness of him as a player for Cleveland, just losing that corner, losing the inside counters. I don't know if he can clean that up or not. Still kind of believe in him, but it has not been very encouraging this year for him. And then James Hudson, just a backup going -1 here, but he has played so bad in a couple starts, having to plug in with all these injuries at tackle. And then one last player in the offense, just of note, Joel Bitonio. I know he's battling through what's listed as a foot injury, so I didn't want to lower him quite yet. But I've got my eyes on the 32-year-old guard. Just hasn't been as efficient as a pass blocker as he's been in years past, and not grading out as well in the run game either. So we'll see where we're at with him at the end of the year. But let's talk about this defense. It's been a disappointing year for the defense, though they have had some better games as of late. I do think one of the primary areas you're feeling the Browns not being quite as dominant as they were last year is Zadarius Smith has not been as efficient as he was last year. His pressure rate's down probably about 30% what it was last year. He's still been okay, still a good pass rusher, but last year he was like a dominant, elite number 2 type of guy, and was just a real problem opposite of Myles Garrett. This year, he's been just good. So he needs to come down for that at this point. He's getting up there in age. He's on the trade block. And again, I think he's a reason you're feeling this pass rush isn't quite the same this year. But that doesn't mean nobody else on this D-line is stepping up. Shout out Isaiah McGuire, a 4th-round pick out of Missouri. He's rotated in there and really played well. It's a big-bodied defensive end. He's, I would say, been an upgrade in terms of run defense. I actually feel like the Browns' run defense has maybe been a little better than they were last year. McGuire kind of setting a hard edge, giving them a little bit more gap discipline there, as opposed to maybe Zadarius or Okoronkwo, who played a lot of snaps on the edge last year. I think that's been an impact for them. And he hasn't given them too much as a pass rusher, 9 pressures and a sack, but he's given it his all. He was never really a polished rusher coming out, but it's good to see him putting his play strength and effort to use for this D-line. And then Mike Hall, not going to change his rating. He's played a few games now coming off the 5-game suspension for domestic violence. He was a huge my guy in this draft. Obviously, not going to endorse the domestic violence situation. Can only just hope he's matured from that. And we don't see any more of that from him, of course. But he's been kind of good for them in 3 games, about 20 snaps, 25 snaps a game. He's just been as advertised in the sense that he's a really good athlete on the interior. He's actually been an impact in run defense. And that was something I said about Mike Hall, that we talked about him as this like 3rd down specialist pass rusher. At least that's what the consensus opinion was on him. But I pointed out, like, hey, he put on 15 pounds since his Ohio State days, and I actually thought his run defense tape wasn't horrible. And he's actually grading out better as a run defender right now than a pass rusher. He does have 5 pressures as well, though, on 51 pass rush snaps. So 10 pressure percent is not bad for an interior D lineman. He's shown some flashes in his first 3 games. Didn't feel the need to change him because this is a guy I am high on, at least on the football field, but wanted to shout him out. But then into the second level, they've had to lean into their backups. They've had a bunch of injuries here. So Mohamed Diabate, a year 2 undrafted player out of Utah, was kind of a awkward, lanky player coming out of Utah. I remember evaluating him and not loving the way he kind of broke down the run and got to the football. And he's really actually stood out in that phase for them. He does have some kind of flow in zone coverage and some good length. So they've gotten solid production from him for what he is. And then Devin Bush, the former 1st-round pick, kind of the opposite. Instead of the skinny, lengthy linebacker like Diabate, Bush, that short, stocky build. He's flying around like kind of, playing for his job or playing for a job and to kind of salvage his career here. It's not much, but, he's cleaned up his missed tackles and is getting to the football. He stood out a little bit. So +1 for Devin Bush. Then into the secondary. It's been some ups and downs for this secondary this year. Coming on a little bit better as of late. But Denzel Ward's been phenomenal, man. Holy crap. Good to see Ward back to looking like a top 5 corner in the league. Even last year, it felt like he should have had a monster season with how good the rest of the defense was. Not that he was bad last year, but didn't really stand out amidst that Browns defense. But this year, man, holy hell. He's been targeted 39 times. He's allowing just 17 receptions, so about 45% completion percentage is outstanding. It's actually even a little bit less than that. But 263 yards on those receptions. So to be fair, he has given up some bigger completions. There's been some chunk gains in there. But beyond that, still just 1 touchdown allowed. But the biggest thing here, 12 passes defended this year. That's crazy. 12 pass breakups to 17 receptions. That's an incredible ratio there. So he has really stood out. And it's just a reminder of how volatile cornerback play is. We know Denzel Ward is a talented player, but it's been a while since he's kind of entered that conversation for who the top 3 to 5 corners in the league are. I think Ward is right in the mix there. As talk about volatility, Sauce Gardner probably not in that conversation this year. But definitely not all good for the secondary. Greg Newsome, I still think he's talented, but having a down year for sure. And he's been on the trade talks for a while now at this point. It's definitely almost kind of feeling like it's trending towards that. He's got to turn it around for Cleveland, I think. Teams have really just been able to pick on him, man. He's allowing 70% of his targets to him. Just one pass breakup on the year. Missing a bunch of tackles. It's just been bad. I didn't want to lower him too much because I really do think he's a talented player. I think he was, probably their best corner last year. And as I just said, there's a lot of volatility in this position. So I like to think he can bounce back as this defense has shown some improvements as of late. But then Martin Emerson is also going to come down. He's just had some really ugly losses. 4 touchdowns allowed this year to just 2 pass breakups. And again, a guy that's missing a lot of tackles. So, an encouraging young player, I think still has a bright future ahead of him, but did need to come down for how he's playing this year. And then just one more guy here in the secondary, the undrafted safety out of Ohio State, Ronnie Hickman, has just been very solid. Nice kind of hometown hero, fun player. A stable run defense presence, not too much of a coverage impact, but hasn't really been a guy that teams have picked on either. So he's been very solid stepping in at safety, as it feels like they're always in kind of a constant turnstile with injuries in the safety room for the Browns. But he's been available for the most part for them. But let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens, and our super stud got to be Lamar Jackson. I know Derrick Henry's a great candidate here as well. But full disclosure, I came in a little bit lower than I probably ended this season last year on Lamar because of that Chiefs playoffs game. I really got spooked by it. And he's just kind of erased that memory with how he's played this year. I'll just put it that way. I mean, he has been absolutely an MVP caliber quarterback again. He's right in the mix, I think, with someone like Josh Allen for that award. And I would actually make the argument that he deserves it even more because his offensive line's not what it was last year. And everything we talked about last year with how in the first year of him in a real drop back passing type of system, he just really proved that he has genuinely elite pocket presence, that Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes trait where he can just navigate the rush, keep his eyes downfield, always, move himself where he needs to be in the face of the rush. And he does that with elite, all-time great athletic ability. And it just makes him obviously such a pain in the ass to deal with. And honestly, I think another argument for why he's been even better than he was last year in his MVP season is I think he's more athletic than he was last year. I think he's lost a little bit of weight for the better. And he's just, to me, is a more electric, elusive runner. And that's shown up as well. So just a ton of credit for Lamar. Last year by season's end, I put him into that top tier of quarterbacks with Burrow and Allen and Mahomes. The Chiefs game happened. I dropped him out of that tier, I think, kind of heading into this year. And he has immediately made me regret that. He is right back into that top tier of NFL quarterbacks. But let's continue to talk about the offense here. Derrick Henry's got to go up, dude. There's not a ton to say here. We've all seen it. It's just been so fun to see him on a good football team. The aesthetic in the Ravens jersey is just perfect. And it's just an amazing testament. I'm sorry, I can't remember who tweeted this out, so I apologize for the lack of a shout out, but someone pointed out that he has over 4,000 carries in his career going back to high school and still looks as good as ever. And the long speed is still there. Like, he's still pulling away from the defense with his long strides, the deceptive speed, the vision, the contact balance, the fact that when you try to tackle this guy, you just bounce right off of him. He doesn't even really truck people. He just kind of keeps running. He can truck you, but he doesn't do it too much. It's just really fun to see. And then his kind of complementary piece here, Justice Hill, is a really nice player here. I'm curious to see, too, if Keaton Mitchell can get back into the lineup here, and you have 2 of these dudes. But Justice Hill has really played his role as that scat back for this team. He's catching everything thrown his way. He's had some really electric dump downs turned into first downs. He's just been a really nice piece here. But then as we get into the receiving crop here, Zay Flowers is going to get a +1. He's been really reliable in terms of the hands. Not that he's completely drop free, but if there was a big knock on him from his rookie season, it was the 8% drop rate. He's down to about 4.5% this year. But they've just funneled their offense through him, and he's held up his end of the bargain. His change of direction and the just some of the ways he makes guys miss after the catch too are so unbelievable. He's making tough catches down the field too, which, to be fair, he did that last year, but he's now going back to last year. Come down with 13 out of 22 contested catch looks. That's 59%. That's really impressive stuff for a smaller guy. He really does have good body control through contact. So he kind of is this do-it-all budding superstar at wide receiver. And he's going to have less attention on him now with Deontay Johnson coming in. I think even if he sees less targets, his efficiency might come up for that reason. But then at tight end, I did want to shout out Mark Andrews. If we did this a few weeks ago, we would have had to lower him because he was just so bad to start the year. We were starting to wonder, if he was done as a Raven. That wasn't a crazy thought week 3. But just he's healthy now and just looks like the old Mark Andrews, if not a little bit better than he's been. So he's an 88 overall. It's obviously a very highly rated player. I didn't feel the need to raise him necessarily. I think he's played up to that, but I did want to shout him out. That if he continues to ball out, he might be going up. But Charlie Kolar, their third tight end, one of my biggest guys in his draft class. So good to see him get these opportunities. I think that's really all it came down to for him. Such a talented receiving threat. And he's just been hyper efficient on his looks. Targeted just 9 times this season, but 7 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown on those targets. So, he just looks the part. And I'm curious if and when a starting opportunity will come for Charlie Kolar, whether that's here in Baltimore or somewhere else. Kind of the new Colby Parkinson, if you will, though I think much higher of Kolar than I do of Parkinson in terms of athletic upside at the position for a receiving tight end. But let's talk about the offensive line. So it's all positive here, even if I still have some reservations on if the right side of the line is good enough. But Ronnie Stanley has been a huge bright spot for this team. The injuries have just racked up, and we didn't know if he was going to be able to stay on the field. If he did, how good he was going to play. It's just been so up and down, and he's just been really, really stable. He had a rough game last week against Myles Garrett. It happens. You leave Ronnie Stanley on an island with Myles Garrett, you're going to have some losses. But +3 for Ronnie Stanley, creeping much more back towards that Pro Bowl caliber left tackle that he once was. And then at right tackle, Roger Rosengarten. Excited to talk about him. This is a rookie that I was lower on him being a second-round guy and someone that they made their starting right tackle right away. And I would just say there's been moments in this season where I've looked right about that. There's been moments in the season where I've looked wrong about that. I think he's been an adequate right tackle. The last couple of weeks, let's be honest, have not been pretty for him. In week 1 as well, when he was kind of rotating there with Makari, he got worked against the Chiefs. But he did have a couple of good starts in there against the Bills and the Bengals. I will say when you watch him, and I've watched a lot of him because he was one of the more fascinating rookies that I had a pretty strong take on. It's so clear that he's a great athlete. He's got really good technique. He's good with his feet. He's good with his hands. But just like we saw at Washington, sometimes his body lets him down. I did not think he was physically ready to start in the NFL. He's a guy that needs to hit the gym and put on play strength. And I do think you see that when he does strike, it's like he's doing the right thing, but he's so easily displaced and pushed aside. He gives up a lot of ground in pass protection and is just very consistently kind of steadily pushed back. So he is getting a +2. He's been an adequate rookie for a second-round pick. He's been above average for where they drafted him and how he's played relative to expectations. But I do think he if he's playing it the way he's playing right now, there's a world where they get to the playoffs and he is an issue for them at right tackle. So definitely an interesting player to keep an eye on. And then Daniel Falele has been all over the place. He's had some really good games. He's had some ugly moments, some of the most ugly moments for a guard in football, which is to be expected from someone that's 6'8", 385 pounds. he's just so stiff and really struggles to get his hands on guys when they're dipping and sliding under him. I don't know, man. I don't know that he is the long-term answer for them, but he's been moving dudes in the run game, and there's been weeks when they can really stick with their run game play action script where he can dominate in pass protection. He's had some super highly graded games in pass pro as well. Buffalo week 4, he had an 86 PFF pass blocking grade. Washington week 6, he had an 88 PFF pass blocking grade. But his grade on the season's at a 66.3. So you can see kind of how the other games have dropped that down. Yeah, he's fascinating, man. He's getting a +1. He's been better than I expected because I thought he was going to be so bad. But I do kind of question if Voorhees is healthy now, if Cleveland's available to start, like, is he really your best option? I'm not sure what the correct answer for that is. But let's flip over to the defensive side of things. This defense has been mostly disappointing with some bright spots. On the defensive line, Travis Jones is really just reaching his potential, I would say. I thought it was just so bizarre that he fell as far as he did in the draft. I know I had like a late first, early second round grade on him, like right next to Devontae Wyatt, basically. And he ends up going in the middle of the third round. And when the Ravens got him, I'm like, I mean, he's going to be really freaking good for them. And that's exactly what he's been. I mean, he's been just such a stable run defender. And what it's allowed them to do is to not have to play Michael Pierce as much. They're able to save Michael Pierce, who is an older injury-prone veteran. They're able to save him a little bit more for the playoffs when they really need him. And Travis Jones has just stepped up on the inside. He's played a lot of nose tackle. He's gotten after the passer as well. Not at an elite level, but he's able to get past guys with his play strength, his size, and pretty good athletic ability for how big he is. He's got 13 pressures and a sack on the year. It's plenty for what you're asking him to do. So he's just been kind of a steady climb since he got into the league, and he's just a really nice player. But inversely, his companion, Nnamdi Madubuike, hasn't quite been as good as Justin Madubuike. But not that he's been horrible. He still made an impact and all that, but just hasn't been nearly as efficient as he was last year. His pressure rate, his sack rate, all that is down about 33% of what it was last year, and I don't have a good reason for it. It could be that Mike McDonald was really good at isolating him and getting him one-on-one looks. Could be just because he broke out last year, teams are paying more attention to him. All speculation there, but he had to come down a little bit. I still think he's a good player, but he was living in teams' backfields last year. That hasn't been the case this year. He's just been a steady, good kind of number 2 caliber interior player. But then on the edge, Tavius Robinson, kind of similar to what we talked about with Isaiah McGuire for the Browns, where, mid-round, 4th round pick, year 2, really starting to emerge as like a capable rotational player for this team. Coming in, giving you 20, 25 snaps a game. He's been a tone setter on the edge and run defense, and he's got 8 pressures, a pair of sacks as a rusher as well. Just kind of a high-effort dude, an interesting background. I want to say he was relatively new to high-end football, came by way of the Canadian pipeline, if you will, and getting some good coaching here in Baltimore. So +2 for him. But then into the second level, just one more player going up for Baltimore here. It is Trenton Simpson. You kind of figured he'd be pretty good in Baltimore just with his background, this hyper athlete that was once mocked in first rounds, but just had no idea what he was doing at linebacker at Clemson. But just obviously a gamble worth taking for Baltimore. And, they felt really good that he could step in that Patrick Queen role where, Roquan's going to do the thinking at linebacker for this team. Just line up next to him, fly around, find the ball, make plays, and develop within your own right as you do that. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Trenton Simpson. He has been a really consistent tackler. He's been ever present in run defense. He's not really getting picked on in coverage, just doing a good job, really in every phase of the game. And things are definitely heading in the right direction for him. And it looks like a good move to replace Patrick Queen with him. Simpson's actually probably outplaying Patrick Queen this season. But definitely some guys in the secondary coming down. They have had their struggles, and they've really missed their starters. Marlon Humphrey has missed some time with injury. I would say First round pick Nate Wiggins not changing in studs and duds this week. He's had a good rookie season. I like Nate Wiggins a lot. Good for a rookie. He's had his ups and downs, but he's been, those have been their two best corners when they've been out there. And when they've been out, as we saw against the Browns, this is not a very good secondary. I mean, Brandon Stevens, Ravens fans, we got after each other in a mock draft last year when I think I put a first round corner to the Ravens and said, Brandon Stevens is not the long-term answer here. A lot of Ravens fans thought this guy was like a career, number 2, like good building block for this defense. And I'm like, I don't know. He's a Band-Aid to me. And, well, they turn around, they draft Nate Wiggins, and when Brandon Stevens has had to step up, he's been really, really bad this year. I mean, he is tied with Cam Taylor-Britt for the 4th most yards allowed this season. Hasn't really made any plays either. 3 pass breakups on 46 targets. It's just not cutting it, man. I just don't think he's a very fluid athlete to truly be a high-end coverage player for the position. He's a fine player, but you're seeing what happens when you really can pick on him. And then some of these safeties are struggling too. Honestly, Marcus Williams he hasn't been around the ball. He's already allowed almost as many yards into his coverage as he did all of last season. And other than last year, he's allowed the most that he has in 4 years. Just 1 pass breakup on the year, a complete non-factor. And if anything, he's been a player that defenses have been able to take advantage of this year. So he's got to come down. And then Eddie Jackson, I was very curious to see what he was going to do here in Baltimore. He's been an interesting player because for a long time, he was just living off of name value. The fact that he played at Alabama, had a great year, either his rookie year or second year, whichever year that was, on that awesome Bears defense. And then for a long time after that was really a below average safety. And then in the middle of when the Bears released him and when he was really struggling, he had one good year where you're like, oh, Eddie Jackson's back. And then he just kind of went back to sucking again. The Bears moved on from him, and the Ravens felt like they could get something out of him still, and he has not been an answer. So while we credited this team for letting Geno Stone go, unfortunately, Eddie Jackson was not the answer that they needed to be looking for, I don't think. And he has allowed the 7th most yards into his coverage of any safety in the league this year, but he's playing substantially less because he's a part of a rotation with Hamilton and Williams. So on a per-snap basis, I can't filter that, but I can only imagine he is the worst in the NFL on a per-snap basis in coverage, and just 1 pass breakup to speak of. So, it's just not working there. And then, hey, Justin Tucker, he had a good run as the GOAT, but unfortunately Brandon Aubrey has taken that title from him, and it's not just because Brandon Aubrey is amazing, it's because Justin Tucker has actually now, for the better part of a year plus, actually been missing a lot of kicks that used to be just automatic for him. So it's just time that we acknowledge that Justin Tucker is on the decline. Still a borderline Hall of Fame type of talent at kicker, but maybe needs to kind of turn this a little bit around and maybe finish off a Super Bowl run for this Ravens team to solidify that case. But with that, let's get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, our final team here. A lot of positive movement for the Steelers here. For their super stud, though, I am going to go with the veteran Cam Hayward. I was wrong, man. They gave him a contract extension after last year at 34, going on 35 years old. He just looked washed, and then they turned around and give him a 3-year contract extension. I'm like, what are you doing? Just let him play out the contract. See if he turns it around this year. Well, they had the faith that he was back, and it goes to show you, like, hey, maybe they're in the building and they can see that he's got his juice back, and they knew what they were doing. And surprise, surprise, the Pittsburgh Steelers knew what they were doing. Anyway, he's kind of like all the way back. He's been insane this year. He has resumed as that ridiculous run defender that he is, that you just don't see a lot of players as compact as him. He plays at about 6'3", 300, which is quote-unquote undersized for a defensive tackle, but his just pound for pound strength is absurd. The way he can shed blocks, that's resumed. But he's also 4th in the NFL in pressures. Like, he's been getting after the quarterback, using that strength to push the pocket too. So he's just been awesome. He's got a +7, 79 to an 86. It's, when you have a guy like this that had been lowered from greatness because of what you thought was physical regression, and then you see him back at it, it's very easy to give him a lot of those ratings points back. So it's a +7 for Cam Hayward. But let's flip over to the offensive side of things before returning to the defense here. And both these quarterbacks are going to get a +1 here. And, we'll start with Russell Wilson. Honestly, if it was more than just 2 games, this would be more than a +1. I think he's looked really impressive here in Pittsburgh, kind of somewhere in between where he was in Denver and what he was in his prime in Seattle. He's very comfortable here. I think having a guy like George Pickens kind of in his back pocket, knowing he has that sort of, I would just call it an elite option in the passing game, the combination of Russell Wilson's moonball. I know it's a tired narrative, but it is a real deal when you have that trait, the ability to throw these catchable touch passes deep down the field for a guy like George Pickens that I've said for multiple years now. His sort of just overall, call it spectacular catch ability, considering this is a Madden roster, but for real football terms, the combination of the catch radius, the ball tracking, the frame, the body control, it's unbelievable. Like I have him with a 99 spectacular catch rating in this Madden roster, even if he's an 83 rated player going up here this week. But we'll just kind of lump these two together with Pickens going up +2. But to have that in his back pocket, I think it's letting him play so composed and comfortable in a way that he wasn't in Denver. He always felt kind of panicked and didn't know what the game plan was in Denver. And I don't know why Courtland Sutton couldn't be that guy, but Pickens has been. And like I said, it's making Russ play more comfortable. He's playing on time. He's eluding sacks. He's protecting the football. He's just been really, really steady in Pittsburgh. It's just a good all-around fit, not just with Pickens, but with this Steelers team, with Mike Tomlin. It just kind of looks and feels right now. And I'll end it by saying this. I'm very curious to see when we get to studs and duds at the end of the season where we're talking about Russ. He's 35 years old, a once elite quarterback, had a falling out. Where does he kind of settle back in here in Pittsburgh? And where does this go with his contract situation? Because he is an upcoming free agent. So loving what we're seeing there. And then, hey, while it was the right move to go to Russell Wilson, and why I'm always hard on Justin Fields, because he's not what 95% of the football world likes to think he is, it doesn't mean he doesn't deserve credit for playing solid football here for the Steelers. And I think he did a really good job doing what the Steelers asked of him to just protect the football. In Chicago, he's had all these other issues. They've been well documented. But on top of that, he would have these back-breaking mistakes in close games late that would lose games for the Bears. He hasn't done that here in Pittsburgh. So that's just been really good to see, taking care of the football. Now, in terms of all the criticisms of the processing time, the ability to see the whole field and access number 2, number 3 wide receivers, I don't really think that improved here. And I think he is what he is. I don't think this is, okay, look better, let's go give him another chance to be a franchise quarterback, but can he be a really nice bridge starter for somebody else? Maybe. So, yeah, just a little love for Justin. Nothing too crazy, though. We talked about Pickens going up, and then Calvin Austin. I thought about making him the super stud for the Steelers. It would have been unwarranted, but I'm just a huge Calvin Austin fan, and just to see him get an opportunity. He's one of these deep threat wide receivers that just hasn't had the ability to be accessed as a deep threat. They've had Kenny Pickett here, who just doesn't throw a great deep ball. Their passing game has just been anemic in general. And Austin himself has dealt with some injuries and stuff that have set him back as well. So it's just really fun to see him making an impact as this team's number 2 wide receiver. He's been a great specialist as well, returning punts. He's had returns of 16, 14, 13, 30, all in different weeks, and then all capped off in the Giants game, a 73-yard touchdown where he shows off the speed, catches a deep ball touchdown in that game as well. Really emerging, again, as a very good fit with Russell Wilson and the ability to unlock the deep ball. And Arthur Smith loves a manufactured deep threat wide receiver. I talked about this heading into the year where the Steelers wide receiving core was something unlike you would ever see, where it was George Pickens, it was the rookie in Wilson, a slot guy out of Michigan, and then they had like 5 true designated deep threat types competing for a spot. And it's been great to see Austin emerge as that dude here. So +3 for Austin. It's still kind of limited opportunities. I don't want to overreact here. He still has a ways to go before he's established, but extremely encouraged by what we've seen there. And then Darnell Washington, talk about another just perfect fit in an Arthur Smith offense as tight end too. He's blocking his ass off. He's like the biggest tight end in the league, not named Mercedes Lewis. Might be even bigger than him though. But just catching the ball too. He's actually had some explosive catches the last couple of weeks. Him and Freiermuth are just an awesome 1-2 punch. So Washington has settled in here and could definitely be, have higher upside than this. But even if this is who he is, as kind of a blocking specialist who can make some tough plays down the field, that's a pretty good player for a third-round pick, what they spent on him. And then talking about blocking specialists, we have plenty of movement on the offensive line for the Steelers, some good, some bad. Dan Moore, the left tackle, they tried to replace him, and he's like, it always comes back to me, Mike Tomlin. Dan Moore starting at left tackle all season long. Unfortunately, that's in large part, obviously, because Troy Fautanu, their first-round pick, done for the year before it ever got started. But Dan Moore, invited the competition with these young guys coming in and has had a career year to his credit. And Moore is a guy, he came into the league as a fourth-round pick, and even if he's had his frustrating moments for Steelers and for the Steelers and Steelers fans, he has well overachieved his fourth-round draft pedigree. He's essentially started every single game, if not literally started every single game since he got drafted as a fourth-round pick. And, having a career year in a contract year when they tried to replace him, he's going to get a contract, whether that's here in Pittsburgh or somewhere else. And honestly, he's playing at a level that he deserves it. Love to see the growth. He's just 26 years old, too. So I'm curious if that's Pittsburgh or somewhere else. We might find out about that sooner rather than later, by the way. I wouldn't be stunned if Pittsburgh extends him soon. And I say that because, unfortunately, their first-round investment, Broderick Jones, is really struggling. And I don't know if Broderick Jones would be playing right now if Fautanu wasn't hurt. He's just been a turnstile in pass protection. He had issues coming out of Georgia. Just his technique was very much all over the place. And even at Georgia, as a run blocker, you saw him fall off blocks and have some kind of low awareness moments in the run game. And that's all come true in Pittsburgh as well. So it's, at least last year it was like, yeah, he's kind of up and down in pass pro, but his run blocking looked really promising. This year, it's just been a lot of ugliness for Broderick. 6 penalties as well on top of all of that. So a -3 for their first-round pick from last year. And I'm wondering if we, again, see a Dan Moore extension and then start to hear maybe the G word getting thrown around with Broderick Jones, potentially moving inside. Because right now, the tackle tape is just not cutting it. But they have seemingly found a couple of rookies to contribute here with Fautanu hurt and Jones struggling. Mason McCormick has been, I would say, about what you would have expected based on what I felt about him coming into the year. I had him rated very nicely for a fourth-round rookie offensive lineman. He's had to start with James Daniels going down at right guard, and he's been pretty damn solid. He's had 5 starts this year. He's had some up-and-down moments in pass protection, and frankly, it was Dexter Lawrence, so you don't hold this against him too much, but he did get his lunch eaten by Dexter Lawrence last week, so that probably stopped this from being a +2 for Mason McCormick, is just some pause on the pass pro stuff. But he's been pretty damn solid as a run blocker. He's just been a nice option to be able to step in with some of these injuries they've had on the O-line. But really hitting on Zach Frazier. We probably should have talked about Frazier first. It just happened to be ordered this way, working outside in. But man, I was wrong on Zach Frazier. Like straight up, no caveats, no way around it. I overthought this on Frazier. I wasn't blown away by the tape. I thought he got displaced a little bit more. I didn't see a great athlete. Not the case in Pittsburgh, man. The tape doesn't lie. He's really, really good. He's just such a sticky run blocker, is how I would describe him. He just understands the savviness of how to get it done, and he's a lot stronger of a run blocker than I gave him credit for coming out too. And it's not that I hated Zach Frazier. I just thought he was a little overhyped. I thought mid to late second round was an okay spot for him, but a lot of people said this was one of the steals of the draft, and Steelers got their franchise center. I was more wait and see on that. Figured he'd be pretty good for Pittsburgh because they tend to know what they're doing with the O-line. But yeah, he's just been really good. He's, call it rookie all-pro lock if there was a rookie all-pro team. But kind of shades of a young Creed Humphrey with Zach Frazier went about the same point in the draft too. So he's fantastic. Got to get him back healthy though. He's missed a couple weeks here, and goodness, the center that they're playing in his place, Ryan McCollum, they can't wait to get him off the field. So hopefully Frazier can get back in there soon. But let's flip over back to the defense. Nick Herbig, another guy that has been unavailable. He got hurt a few weeks ago. But, I mean, the league let the Steelers get another one of these guys. And I actually am not going to stop short of saying this could be an Alex Highsmith situation. He literally has the same traits that both TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith have. Like the shorter, compact, bendy, hyper athletes at the edge. Like that's what Herbig is. And he's just winning with the same like dip and rip move. Like it's just a spitting image of the types that have worked for this team. Obviously limited opportunities because he's playing behind the best edge rush duo in the league that don't really come off the field. He's got 9 pressures and 4 sacks on just 79 pass rush snaps. And those 4 sacks are like absolute legit, beat his guy, got home, not like random cleanup sacks either. To put it in perspective, if you remove snap filters on PFF, he's the 8th highest graded edge rusher in the league. If you break it down to 20% snap count, he's 6th. And that's about all he's played here, is about 20% of the team's snaps. So he can only go up so much when he's not playing that much. But there will be a point in time, I think, where Nick Herbig is like a real impact edge defender. I don't know when that's necessarily going to come, but this is a big eye test thing. And from the second they drafted him, it just had a good feeling. But with the linebackers, really fun complement of a complementary duo here, kind of a starter between the two. I've become such more a fan of LB by committee, especially for a second linebacker. It's exactly what the Steelers are doing here. Landon Roberts, the early down guy, where he can focus on what he does well. He's been an awesome run defender. Obviously had one of the highlights of the year, very Troy Polamalu-esque, to try and salvage that Dallas game where, it's like 3rd and goal, no time left. They have to get a defensive stop. He times the snap, leaps over the pile, doesn't just stop the running back, but forces a fumble that could have won the game for his team. Just one of the plays of the year that just, unfortunately, the ball just took the wrong bounce. Can you imagine if the Steelers recovered that and they win that game because of that play? Holy hell. But that's not the only play he's made. He's been just a smash-mouth run defender all year long. And then they take him off the field for the rookie Peyton Wilson. I love that because Peyton Wilson was this really unique player in a wide variety of ways, where he played a lot of edge in college, but showed good stuff in coverage, really wasn't ready to stop the run in the league, in my opinion. Maybe can get there, but very lanky, struggled to get off blocks, and was not always getting to his keys on time, not to his own fault. He just didn't play a lot of linebacker. He played a lot of edge for NC State. But Pittsburgh has gotten the absolute perfect role for him here. It's been limited production. It's nothing crazy. It's a +1 for Peyton Wilson. But they put him in on coverage downs, and his range and length over the middle of the field, sideline to sideline ability, the tackling consistency has been really good for him. And it also protects him from his biggest liability, and that is injury potential. Not asking him to get nasty in the trenches and play 60 snaps a game might even be the best long-term outlook for a guy like Peyton Wilson. Obviously, you would love to see him reach crazy potential and stay healthy and be this great 3-down linebacker, but realistically, this is a really good way to start his career, at least. So I like what they're doing with that. Honestly, you wish you were getting more from Patrick Queen as their LB1 who stays on the field. I didn't lower Patrick Queen because I already was really low on him coming into the year. Steelers fans were really mad at me for my rating of Patrick Queen. I've got him at, I think, a 76. I don't think he's been that bad, but he has gone back to basically the guy he was in Baltimore before Roquan got there. So maybe we should lower Patrick Queen. It's first half of the year in a new system. We'll see. Maybe at the end of the year we'll throw him on the notes, I suppose, with a downwards check mark there. But then into the secondary. Wow, they found something in this Beanie Bishop. I mean, first off, Cam Sutton got activated today. Detroit cut him. Pittsburgh picked him up. I mean, just get him off the team with Beanie Bishop playing like this. Like, why do you need to have that loser on your team? I read the report on him. He bit like a golf ball sized hole in his girlfriend's neck and then proceeded to choke her out. Like, yeah, that's the guy we want to take off suspension and put on the team. No, give me Beanie Bishop over that. It's not like Cam Sutton played that well for Detroit the last time he played. This dude's sweet. He's going to be a 25-year-old rookie, I believe. His birthday's in mid-December. Played a lot of football in college, West Virginia. He would have played with Tyke Smith, I believe, which, God, these two guys in your secondary in college must have been really fun. If there's any West Virginia fans, I'd love to hear if you ever saw those guys out there together. But Bishop has kind of been like Tyke Smith as a playmaking rookie slot corner. He's had 3 interceptions this year. 2 of them have fallen into his lap, but one of them was like an incredible play where he kind of baits Aaron Rodgers into throwing over the middle of the field. Just the awareness and change of direction to make that play as Rodgers trying to thread it behind his zone coverage was just really good. He's been tackling well for an undersized slot corner. He's a good athlete, 4.39 40 type. Just a really good find for Pittsburgh. I've been really impressed. So I had to create him. He wasn't in the game, but a very respectable 70 overall mark for the undrafted rookie corner. And then Deshaun Elliott's been a really nice pickup for the Steelers. He's hitting harder than he ever has. He's playing run defense better than he ever has. I still don't think he's like this crazy good coverage defender or anything like that, but he's just been popping on the field more than I feel like he ever has in his career. So he's going up +1, 77 to a 78. And then our very last player, a punter, very close to my namesake, Corliss Waitman. Not Whitman, but they go with him over Cam Johnston, who was their punter in the offseason. And it was a good call. He is the 6th highest rated punter in the league. Half of his punts have been pinned inside the 20 and just balling out. So he gets a big boost. But that is going to do it for AFC North, Studs and Duds. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Again, please do hit that like button down below to support the series. But let me know where you agree, where you disagree. Do you think I missed anybody? I'll try to check through all of the comments here. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow definitely tomorrow, because I got to get it out before Sunday. So we'll see you tomorrow for AFC West, Studs and Duds. Peace out.